Hello, this is my second video. I probably ought to have some intro music, but I'm afraid my technical abilities are extremely limited, so I will work on it, and then maybe there'll be some nice music at some point. This video is inspired by some other videos that I've seen on YouTube, particularly seems to be coming out of Asia, where they ask foreigners about their experiences living in another country. So the title of this video is going to be, what is it like being a foreigner in Colombia? And I have stolen the questions from a video about foreigners in China, and I'll put the link below, so if anybody's interested in watching that video, I will provide it, and you can compare and contrast, as it were. So the first question is, where are you from? Where am I from? I am from originally, I would say, Oxfordshire in England. I actually grew up in a town called Abingdon, or on the outside of Abingdon, which is a very small, very historic market town in England with a dilapidated abbey. What else can I say about Abingdon? Has links to the band Radiohead, so if you like the music by Radiohead, then perhaps Abingdon might fit with your aesthetic. How long have you been here in Colombia? I first came to Colombia on a trip in 2010, and then I was here for about 6 weeks. Then I think I came back 6 months later for another month or so, and I think I made one more trip before I finally moved here in 2013. And I now live in, well, I live in the middle of nowhere. I live in a mountainous region, the closest town of which is El Retiro, which is a small, again, market town in East Antioquia, about 20 to 30 minutes from Medellin, depending on whether you're going by bus, car, motorbike, donkey, depending on your mode of transport. What made you decide to move here? When I first came here in 2010, I came here to make a small trip, a small holiday to visit a friend of mine who is Colombian, who I met at university. I never ever imagined when I made that trip that I would consider leaving my life in England and coming to Colombia to live what seems to be now permanently. I came here, I think, when I reflect on it now, because it seems so long ago, I think I was very much enamored with the colours, the mountains, the weather, the drama of everything, the mists, the storms, the warmth of the people as well. I mean, Colombian people are extremely warm, caring people, and I can't come up with very good reasons as to why I came here, apart from a feeling that I had, that I felt happy here, happy in this place. Let me show you some of the green of Colombia. It's such a vibrant place. So I think it was the vibrancy and the drama of the whole thing. What was your idea of Colombia before you came here? This is a question that I have been asked so many times by Colombian people. Many people say to me, "What did what did you think about Colombia? Did you think it was all about drugs? What did you think?" And the honest answer is, I don't think I had what may be a stereotypical outsider's view of Colombia before I came here. My idea of Colombia probably had a lot to do with my friend, and so I think my idea of Colombia was very much blended with the idea of my friend, and she's an extremely passionate person, an extremely courageous person. I don't know, that probably doesn't answer the question very well, but the honest truth is I didn't have a very clear fantasy of what I expected Colombia to be like. Oh, I did expect it to be hot. I expected it to be hot all the time and everywhere, and that's not true. The next question is, after your time here, has your perception of Colombia changed? Well, but given that I didn't really have a clear perception before, I can't really say whether it's changed, but certainly it's not hot all the time everywhere. In fact, it's quite cold. And when I emigrated here, I made the mistake of throwing away a lot of my warm clothes, my jumpers and stuff from England that really would have come in handy. But when I was leaving England to emigrate on the night before, I was still packing, because I find packing an incredibly stressful experience. Like, I can't tell you how stressful I find packing. I think it's the idea that if you don't have the stuff with you that you need, then it's too late and you can't get it or something. I don't know, but I completely freaked out. So I threw away loads of jumpers, thinking, well, I won't need them. And then I arrived in Colombia, and it was freezing cold, and all I wanted was a chimney piece or something. So in that respect, my perception has changed. Oh, the other thing perhaps I thought was that everybody in Colombia just sort of danced salsa all the time, that salsa was this very Colombian thing. And since then I've realised that actually Colombian music is so varied, and there are so many forms of music that really are far more Colombian, you know, bambuco, palenque music. I mean, it's just endless, the kind of genres of music that we have here. And salsa for me is, if I'm honest, I mean, I do like salsa very much, but in some ways it's kind of my least favourite genre. And I think actually, I'm not an expert on this, but is salsa even Colombian? I think it might be actually even North American, and a fusion of different, I don't know, I'll stop there because I don't really know what I'm talking about, but certainly that is something that changed. What surprised you about Colombia that many foreigners don't know about? I think what has surprised me the most is how taboo it is in Colombia to talk about anything perceived as being sort of emotionally negative. So if you want to talk about sadness or grief or these kind of things, so sort of, yeah, let's call them negative emotions, but I'm not sure that I particularly see them as negative, or rather as just a form of emotion. But I think the taboo around talking about emotional pain, I think that certainly surprised me. What kind of stereotypes have you come across about foreigners in Colombia? Well, I think it depends on the foreigner, or the foreign land that the person is deemed to come from. I'm English, and the stereotypes that I repeatedly come across about the English are that the English are cold, they're very emotionally inaccessible, they don't express anything. What else? They're extremely tall. I mean, I've heard very peculiar things. I mean, I've even heard, I mean, I don't know whether this is acceptable, because I don't know what the laws are around these things, but I've heard things like, oh, English women have particularly long vaginas. I mean, you know, I've heard the most bizarre things about fantasies about what English people are like. But the repeated thing is that English people are very cold. As for other foreigners, I'm not really sure, because I haven't really I don't actually know many foreigners in Colombia. I mean, I think where I live, there are so few foreigners, I just don't come into contact with any. So, I don't know. I wouldn't know what people say about Germans or Americans, which are probably the other foreigners that you're more likely to come across in Colombia. But yeah, certainly about English people, that we're very cold, and you know, and also that we're not family people, that we're not good at having relationships with families. We don't care about families. We don't look after elderly people. This kind of thing. Where do these stereotypes come from? And I'm reading these questions off a list. I don't really know, again, because I don't actually have a television. So I don't really watch a lot of Colombian television. I mean, I see it sometimes in shopping malls, because often there are televisions in shopping malls. Or if I go to someone's house and they have the television on, I'm exposed to it. But I would assume that these stereotypes, I mean, they must come from the media. However, I would say that I don't really see any English television here in Colombia. So whilst I do know that American television programs have been and continue to be sometimes popular here, people have Netflix now and things like that. I think these stereotypes about the English being cold are largely based upon a fantasy, because I think the English have had a very relatively almost non-existent relationship compared to other countries with Colombia. So I think the more you don't know about the other, the more you make up what you think they're like, you know. So I think if you haven't had any contact with an English person, and you just hear a kind of, I don't know, rumour that they're cold, then I suppose you just kind of incorporate that without even realising. So I would say that this idea that English people are cold is largely based on a lack of contact with English people, but I mean, that's just my view at the moment. How are foreigners portrayed in the media? Well, as I just said, I don't really read, or I don't really look at a lot of television, so I wouldn't really know how English people come across in television. However, what I would say is that foreigners are very much used in advertising here. I mean, like I said, I live near Medellin. That would be the hugest city close to where I live. If you look at a lot of the advertising for major brands, very often it seems that the models are not Colombian. I mean, you know, extremely blonde women, you know, and you know, things like that. You know, a lot of them are American models from Miami and things like that. So I would say that foreigners are very much used to advertise a product to Colombian people, and those foreigners, well, by nature of being foreigners, they're not from here, so that's kind of weird. Although I think it has changed slightly. In all the time that I've been here, I've started to see more Colombian people in advertising, but I feel that there's quite a long way to go in that. I mean, perhaps that happens worldwide. I mean, in England as well, you know, different foreign stereotypes are used to sell a product. You know, if you're going to sell salsa dancing classes or something, you're probably going to have a Latin person in your advert or something like that. In England, to convey, you know, your brand or something like that. So yeah. The international media reports. Oh yes. So yeah, the international media, obviously the image they probably give of Colombia, because the only time you really see Colombia in television or in the media is to report maybe that they found, you know, a lot of cocaine, you know, in a submarine arriving somewhere, which they attribute to Colombia, or maybe talking about elements related to the finishing or ongoing or ended, depending on your point of view, armed conflict in Colombia. So obvious, are these accurate? That was the question. You know, are these media reports accurate? Well, obviously, if you report a protest that's happening, there's a certain level of accuracy to that. I mean, you're showing what's going on. What I would say is that obviously, if that's all you show, you know, if you only show protests in Bogota, or if you the capital city, or if you only show submarines with cocaine arriving in the Mediterranean coast or whatever, you know, obviously these things are happening, but it gives you an extremely limited portrait of what's happening in a country. I mean, you know, if the only thing that you saw in Colombia was gang violence in Brixton, for example, you would have the idea that, you know, that was typically English, whereas it's an ongoing situation in England with complex causes, just like there are complex causes things in Colombia. So I would say that very, you know, crime-based sensationalism about Colombia obviously has massive effects. I mean, the other thing to say is that, you know, series like Narcos, which I haven't watched yet, and I tried to sort of start watching. Yes, I got 10 minutes, and my heart was sort of somewhere between palpitating and dead. You know, I'll have to reflect on it a bit more. Obviously, the sensationalization of narco trafficking, drug trafficking, creates a very, very particular view of Colombia that I think negates so many other aspects to the country, particularly its culture and its biodiversity and regional differences, which I think for me is something that's very beautiful about Colombia, the regional differences. As a foreigner, what worries you about living in Colombia? Well, as a woman living in a rural area, sometimes I feel nervous, for example. If I'm in a very rural area, this happened to me once, my car broke down. Well, actually, I had an accident. I had a car accident. Felt extremely vulnerable as a woman, out in the middle of a very mountainous, jungly area in the middle of nowhere. That was quite scary. Although what I would say is nothing happened. I mean, various men passed by on motorbikes and cars, and they all, tried to help me, and they were all very kind. And I never actually felt unsafe when I actually interacted with people. I do speak Spanish, so that probably helps me. I don't speak it perfectly, but I do speak it, and with a sort of funny localish accent, so that probably helps me to interact with people. But so sometimes I have felt a bit nervous, as I think many women would if you're sort of out on your own, you don't really see anybody. But apart from that, I suppose maybe bureaucratically you feel quite vulnerable. I mean, you sort of have your paperwork and everything, and you have to have your citizen's card with you at all times. Show who you are, and you might have, particularly if you drive, you might have to present that to police or army on a regular basis, who are patrolling the area where you live. Sometimes I worry that if there was a very extreme change of political system, like a very rapid change of political system, that might lead to a very unpredictable situation in Colombia. However, I don't think that is likely to happen in the near future because of other extreme political changes that have happened in countries around Colombia. So I think Colombia is quite nervous about making a very strong political change in the near future. They might maybe make more of a shift to the left, but probably not in an extreme way. Yeah, that probably might answer that question. Have you ever felt discriminated against as a foreigner? I have experienced what people would call positive discrimination. I mean, I wouldn't call it positive discrimination. Where you're in a queue, and because you're a foreigner in the supermarket, other people would just say, "Oh, go in front," or in the bank, go in front. And I'm not sure how much of that is because I'm foreign, how much of that is because I don't know, I look funny, I look a bit eccentric, I don't know, people will sort of push you forward. I find that quite uncomfortable, and I usually say no, like, please, no, that makes me very uncomfortable. But when you say no here, like if you refuse an invitation of any kind, like to go in front, to have a biscuit, whatever it is, people take offence very easily here. So the idea of saying no, or that I'm not going to do what you want, can create problems quite quickly. So you have to be a bit sensitive about that. So sometimes it might be easier to just say, okay, thank you very much. Other ways of being discriminated against, yeah, like I say, people having ideas about me that I'm very cold without having even met me. Sometimes that's hurt my feelings and in certain situations, but I do understand that perhaps if you haven't, like I say, had much contact with English people, you might have ideas about English people that don't really belong to them. Like, I think there are cultural stereotypes, obviously, but they're also individuals, and there's also variation amongst people. Is there white privilege in Colombia? Yes, I mean, undoubtedly. I mean, this is a post-colonial society, and ideas about race are extremely entrenched. To give an example, I have heard so many Colombian people, women in particular, look at black women in Colombian media and say things like, "Oh, she's so pretty for her race. Ella muy belleza por su raza." It's totally shocking to me. It's still totally shocking to me, and I never cease to hear something like that without feeling so deeply enraged. And I experience that rage because I think categorizing anybody without knowing them for whatever reason is just so appalling. But the idea that a woman is pretty within her group or something, like for a black woman she's pretty, it's just disgusting. And I've heard that phrase so many times, I mean, I could give more examples, but then the video would go on and on and on. So I think that gives you an idea. The other thing I would say that there is a massive class privilege here. I mean, I come from England, which is known to be a very classist society. However, I would say that in England the class system has massively changed. I mean, since the Second World War, and is you know, it's collapsing all the time and changing all the time. Despite the fact we still have an aristocracy, we still have a royal family, you know, this kind of thing. However, Colombia is just probably, I mean, I don't know, there are probably lots of other countries, you know, I haven't been to and I don't have close contact with, but this is an extremely classist society, and people very rarely move outside of their class, and I think that creates a very, again, very entrenched views about people from other classes. I mean, here they use a system called what they call stratas, which are economic bands, which, you know, have some bearing with the class system. You know, if you're strata 6, you're likely to be upper class. If you're strata 1, you know, you're not very likely to be upper class, or, you know, almost impossible to be upper class. However, class isn't just about social economic status. You know, it's about who your parents were, who your grandparents were. Do you have a membership to a country club? How many houses do you have? You know, what kind of car do you drive? Do you spend Christmas in Miami? You know, did you go to Swiss finishing school? You know, it's just endless. You know, it's for me, it's just the most archaic thing, the class aspect of Colombia. What would you say to people visiting Colombia? I would say visit Colombia. The first thing I would say is visit Colombia. This is the most amazing country. It's beautiful. There's so much to see. I mean, you'll never be bored. I would also say, you know, don't bring with you ideas, you know, that you may have had from the media about Colombia. You know, try and suspend those while you're here. And I think if you're just visiting for a trip, you'll never come into contact with, you know, at the moment in the current political system, you'll never come into contact with violence or any of this kind of thing. The other thing is, I would say living in Colombia is very different to visiting Colombia, because obviously you start to peel away more of the layers to the country. You know, the closer you have any relationship with a place or with a person, the more intimate that becomes, and the more you start to, you know, either love more things about that thing or start to hate things, or begin to even love the things that you hate. It's complex. Yeah, so I'll leave it there. Again, I don't have any exit music, but try and imagine that there's some sort of nice exit music here, and I will put the link to the Chinese video below, because it's very interesting to hear what other foreigners say about other countries. Bye for now.